The zip ties cut into my wrists, tight enough to leave a mark, but not enough to stop me from staring directly into Karen Bellamy's eyes as she delivered her so-called citizen's arrest order. "You're under citizen's arrest for unauthorized grilling," she barked, clipboard in one hand, pepper spray in the other, a bottle she had labeled Karen Mist in glitter pen. Behind her stood 3 men dressed like bootleg security guards, one in cargo shorts and aviators, another with a plastic badge clipped to his belt, and the third holding a roll of zip ties like he was ready to storm a compound. All of them wore matching t-shirts that read Foxglove Ridge Tactical Unit. I stood on my own property, a spatula still in hand, the smell of slow-cooked ribs lingering in the air, and they were treating me like I was a war criminal. It wasn't just absurd, it was criminal. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some guy flipping burgers in a backyard. I was Sheriff Mason Riley, and this wasn't my first rodeo. But I didn't fight back. I didn't yell. I simply waited because I knew what was coming. And right on cue, a familiar black and white cruiser rounded the corner, sirens blaring, lights flashing. The crowd gasped. My deputies had arrived. Let's rewind. Drop your city below. We want to see how far this story has reached. That Saturday had started just like any other in the sleepy, upscale neighborhood of Foxglove Ridge, the kind of HOA-run suburb where lemonade stands needed permits and homeowners received citations for having patriotic wind chimes. I'd just come off a brutal week of patrols, a rash of porch pirates, a fender bender that escalated into a golf club duel, and a teenage prankster who thought it'd be hilarious to dress as Bigfoot and terrorize joggers. So when my weekend hit, I decided to unwind the only way I knew how. Grilling. I prepped a full spread ribs, brats, burgers, made my famous bourbon barbecue sauce, even invited a few off-duty deputies for sweet tea later in the afternoon. But that piece was short-lived. At 2:03 p.m., a microphone screeched from across the street like a banshee doing a sound check. "This is an official HOA directive. All unauthorized activities must cease immediately," came the nasal war cry of Karen Bellamy. I sighed and looked over the fence. Sure enough, there she stood decked out in camo-patterned yoga pants, a tactical vest loaded with pens, post-its, and a personal body cam strapped to her chest. She paced the street like a 4-star general defending a war zone. Behind her, the aforementioned tactical unit strutted around like they were fresh off basic training, only their battlefield was the cul-de-sac and their enemy, apparently, was the scent of smoked meat. Karen spotted me. Her eyes narrowed. She raised her walkie-talkie, a toy store-looking thing that still somehow crackled to life, and called in the cavalry. "This is Unit Alpha. Non-compliant male at Lot 17. Initiate detainment protocol. Repeat, detainment protocol is a go." You'd think someone had declared martial law. I chuckled, turned back to my grill, and kept flipping ribs. That was my first mistake. 10 minutes later, 3 golf carts rolled up painted matte black with tactical response, stenciled on the sides, and flashing blue LED lights duct taped to the roofs. The siren? A Bluetooth speaker playing a loop of a goose honking. From one cart, the leader, a guy named Trent, who once got fired from a local paintball arena for over-aggressive behavior, barked at me like he was on SWAT rotation. "Step away from the meat. Hands where we can see them." I didn't flinch. Instead, I gave them the friendliest smile I could muster. "Mason Riley," I said calmly. "Sheriff, you boys sure you want to do this?" They hesitated. Karen didn't. "He's impersonating law enforcement to avoid HO accountability," she shrieked. "Detain him!" And just like that, Trent lunged forward. Before I could reach for my badge, I was zip-tied and marched across my own lawn like a fugitive. The moment was surreal. Neighbors peeking through curtains, a few recording on their phones. The air smelled like barbecue and civil rights violations. But as they dragged me toward the curb, my smile never faded, because I heard it before anyone else. The wail of real sirens. The cavalry was coming, and this time, Karen had no jurisdiction. The tactical parade froze mid-strut as Deputy Riley's cruiser came to a screeching halt. She threw the door open, boots crunching against gravel, hand already hovering near her sidearm, not out of fear, but disbelief. "Mason," she said, blinking twice, eyes locked on the zip ties cutting into my wrists. "What the hell is going on?" Karen stepped forward like she'd just won an Oscar. "Perfect timing, officer," she announced to the crowd gathering across the street. "We've apprehended this man for non-compliance. He's been operating pollutive cooking machinery in violation of HOA Code 11B, unauthorized grill used during community-sanctioned events." Riley stared at her as if she'd just grown a third eye. Karen continued, waving her clipboard like a royal decree. "This arrest is fully supported by the Foxglove Ridge Emergency Citizen Enforcement Initiative." "Which is what exactly?" Riley asked, arms crossed, gaze now darting between the pretend SWAT team and my barbecue. "An extension of HOA authority during block events," Karen beamed. "We've taken the liberty of assigning tactical response duties to our community's safety ambassadors." I tilted my head toward the men still holding my arms. "You mean these guys?" Trent, visibly sweating now, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. One of the others actually whispered, "I told you this was dumb." Riley sighed and reached forward to cut the zip ties. As they fell to the ground, I flexed my wrists and said, "Much appreciated." Karen stepped forward, outraged. "You're interfering with a lawful HOA operation." That's when Riley lost it. "Lady, you zip-tied the sheriff on his own property during his weekend." I had cause. "You had delusions," she muttered. But Karen wasn't finished. "I will not be intimidated by your little patrol car. This man has violated the HOA's Clean Living Initiative. The smoke from his grill has directly impacted our neighborhood's breathable air rating." Riley raised an eyebrow. "I smell mesquite and ribs." "He didn't register his protein source with the HOA Wellness Subcommittee," Karen snapped, now trembling with rage. The crowd started laughing. One neighbor even shouted, "What's next? A tofu permit?" But Karen doubled down. She handed me a handwritten citation that read, "Violation 7A, weaponized barbecue emissions." "I'm framing this," I said, holding it up. Riley leaned toward me. "Want me to cuff her?" "Not yet," I replied. "She's about to hang herself without help." And she did. Karen turned to the crowd, chest heaving, and shouted, "He's trying to undermine community unity. He's a rogue authority figure trying to dismantle our governance structure. This isn't just about grilled meat. This is a coup attempt." I couldn't help it. I laughed. That's when the phones came out, more than a dozen neighbors now documenting every insane word she said. It was glorious. Karen, panicking, barked at Trent and the boys. "Form perimeter formation, Charlie. Bravo, lock down the street." Trent looked at me, then at Riley, then at the badge on my belt, finally whispering, "Karen, I'm going home." One by one, her tactical unit retreated, leaving Karen in the center of the street, alone, flanked only by her clipboard and her delusions. I walked up slowly, holding out my wallet. "Mason Riley," I said clearly, "Sheriff of Dawson County, elected by the people, protected by the law." I took a breath. "And what you just pulled, that's unlawful detainment, impersonation of law enforcement, and possibly even assault." She opened her mouth to protest, but I kept going. "There are no HOA codes that override the Constitution, and certainly none that give you the right to start a private militia with golf carts and duct tape lights." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One man whispered, "She fined me last week for planting lavender. Said it wasn't neighborhood appropriate." Karen saw the shift happening the way eyes were turning on her, not me. "This isn't over," she shrieked, voice cracking. "He's a danger to this community. He's... "Grilling ribs?" I offered. She pointed a shaking finger. "The sheriff thinks he's above the law." "No," I replied. "I am the law." That line landed exactly how I hoped. Someone clapped, then another, and soon the crowd was cheering. Karen's face flushed crimson. She turned, stomped back to her house, and slammed the door behind her. But we all knew it wasn't over. People like Karen don't disappear. They regroup. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got a tip from a neighbor, a quiet woman named Myra, that would blow the whole situation wide open. Karen wasn't just abusing power. She was hiding something. It started with a knock, soft, hesitant, at my office door. I looked up from my desk to find Myra Connolly, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down from Karen. She was clutching a manila envelope like it held the cure to something terminal. She said if I ever spoke up, she'd have my lawn dug up and call it a zoning violation, Myra whispered. But after what she did to you, I can't stay quiet. Inside the envelope were 3 documents: a fine notice for improper curtain color visible from sidewalk, a second for excessive flag waving, and a third, the most outrageous, for emotional noise pollution during a family wake. She made me pay all 3 in cash. No receipts, Myra added, tears rising in her eyes. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about barbecue anymore. This was systematic abuse. Over the next 72 hours, I worked quietly. No sirens, no raids, just long walks around the block and hushed front porch chats with residents who, until now, were too intimidated to speak. The stories piled up like unpaid HOA dues. A disabled vet was fined $200 for installing a wheelchair ramp without aesthetic pre-approval. A single mom was threatened with property seizure if she didn't remove her daughter's birthday balloons within 3 hours of the party ending. An older couple claimed Karen had inspected their garage in the middle of the night under the guise of checking for illegal tool storage. Then came the game-changer Jason, a tech-savvy neighbor in his 20s. He'd installed a new surveillance system, and while checking software pings, he picked up something unusual: a drone. Not a toy, a military-grade quad with onboard mic and GPS routing. It had flown directly over 6 homes, including mine. He showed me the footage, and my blood ran cold. There I was on my porch, on a call with a DEA contact. The audio, muffled, but clear enough to violate every privacy law in the book. "She's spying," Jason said quietly. "And if she's listening to the sheriff, what else is she capturing?" I took it to county legal the next morning. It took them less than 10 minutes to confirm. Federal lines had been crossed. Using surveillance to intercept law enforcement communication, even unintentionally, was a felony. Karen hadn't just gone too far. She'd leapt headfirst into criminal territory. We needed more proof the drone was paid for by the HOA. That's when Julie, the board treasurer, reached out. "I've been scared for years," she whispered, handing me a flash drive. "But when I heard about the drone, I knew she'd crossed a line no president should ever come near." Inside were spreadsheets, transaction logs, and emails. Not just surveillance equipment. Karen had approved purchases under code names like Community Beautification Tech, the drone; Crisis Response Uniforms, tactical shirts; Neighborhood Engagement Sessions, wine nights at Brad's house; Incident Readiness Drills, including a 3-day workshop Brad attended, complete with photos of him posing with a cardboard cutout labeled Hostile Grill Operator. But the worst was an email directly from Karen to the board. "We need actionable intel on Mason Riley before he uses his badge to undermine community compliance efforts. Use every tool we have." There it was, the smoking gun. I handed it all over to the DA's office. In hours, we had what we needed. A court-ordered warrant. 2 days later, just after sunrise, I stood across the street as unmarked vehicles rolled into Foxglove Ridge. Deputies, forensics, a drone task force team. It wasn't a movie scene, it was a reckoning. Karen stumbled out in her pink robe and slippers, coffee mug reading Boss Lady, shaking in her hand. "This is trespassing," she screamed. "I am the HOA." A deputy calmly handed her a binder. Judge signed. Federal authorization. She paled as they passed her, storming into the HOA office in her garage, collecting files, hard drives, surveillance logs, budget records. Neighbors gathered like it was a 4th of July parade. One man handed me a breakfast taco and said, "We love you, Sheriff." Even Brad, who had clearly flipped sides, sat on his porch sipping lemonade. looking like he'd just been rescued from a doomsday cult. But it wasn't just the paperwork they recovered. In a locked closet labeled storage, they found Karen's war room maps with pins and red string, a corkboard covered in photos of residents labeled things like problematic, watch list, and under surveillance. They even found HOA video logs from the drone, including a private family argument recorded through an open window, a sunbathing couple in their fenced backyard, and worst of all, footage of a child's birthday party with Karen narrating like she was filming a National Geographic episode, pointing out unauthorized inflatable devices and excessive sugar-based beverages. That was the last straw. Karen was immediately suspended from all HOA duties. The board voted to freeze operations pending a full investigation. She'd tried to run her own kingdom. Now the government, the real one, had come knocking. And we weren't done yet. The town hall was packed. Not just with residents of Foxglove Ridge, but reporters, officials, even neighboring community leaders, all wanting to witness the fallout of what local media had now dubbed the suburban coup. I stepped onto the stage, no badge visible, just a clipboard and my truth. I didn't open with a warning or a threat. I opened with an apology. I'm sorry I didn't dig deeper when the first complaints came in. I'm sorry I assumed this was a neighborly feud instead of the authoritarian regime it became. And I'm sorry it took me being zip-tied next to a barbecue grill to realize how deep the rot had grown. Then I laid it out clearly, calmly, and in full detail. The fake citations. The cash-only fines. The illegal drone surveillance. The weaponized HOA budget. The private tactical training classes for HOA enforcers. The psychological warfare waged on an entire neighborhood by one woman with a clipboard and a god complex. Gasps filled the room. Some neighbors nodded. Others cried. People began to realize this wasn't just eccentric HOA overreach. This was abuse of power on a level that belonged in a courtroom, not a cul-de-sac. When Karen tried to enter the meeting, dressed in a navy blazer and knockoff Gucci sunglasses, she was stopped by two deputies at the door. Her smile was too wide, her voice too calm. "This is a political hit job," she told the news cameras. "The sheriff wants my seat on the board. He's afraid of strong leadership." I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. The trial was swift, brutal, unforgettable. Karen represented herself. Of course she did. She walked into the courtroom with a binder labeled Freedom versus Tyranny, OA edition, and began with what I can only describe as a TED Talk from a parallel dimension. She cited TikTok creators as legal precedent. Read aloud Facebook comments as public support. She even accused me of being part of a deep grill conspiracy. But the evidence was undeniable. Financial records tying drone and surveillance tech directly to HOA funds. Audio recordings of Karen issuing threats to elderly residents. Testimonies from over 40 homeowners, each more disturbing than the last. The corkboard recovered from her command center, listing residents like non-compliant and target future citations. Footage from her drone, where she narrated a child's birthday party like it was a threat assessment report. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Karen's smug grin faded. The judge let her ramble for 2 full days then, with the slam of a gavel, rendered the verdict. Guilty on 6 charges. Impersonating law enforcement, illegal surveillance, misuse of HOA funds, harassment, unlawful detainment, abuse of power under a civic entity. She wouldn't go to prison, not yet. That would only fuel her victim complex. Instead, the court delivered something worse. 800 hours of community service under direct county supervision, a lifetime ban from any position in a registered HOA, full financial restitution to the residents of Foxglove Ridge. And her service? Started at the sheriff's department. Every Monday and Wednesday, she reported for duty in a neon vest sorting mail, washing patrol vehicles, picking trash from courthouse lawns. The first time she passed me in the break room, she didn't speak, just shot me a glare as I sipped my coffee. I raised my mug. She looked away. It was poetic justice. Back in Foxglove Ridge, the real healing began. The board appointed an interim president, Nena Perez, a retired city clerk with zero interest in power games and a deep love of tulips. Her first act? Nullify every fine issued under Karen's reign. Issue full refunds to residents. Open the HOA books for public review. Start monthly Q&A sessions with actual voting rights. The community transformed. Kids played in yards again, balloons and all. Neighbors hosted porch parties without fear of a sugar-based beverage citation. Brad, now humbled and thoroughly deprogrammed, worked part-time at the community pool. His tactical vest replaced with a lifeguard shirt, no sunglasses, no clipboard. And Karen? Well, she was there too. In a new orange vest, picking up candy wrappers at the community celebration hosted in her honor, or rather, in honor of her downfall. Someone had placed a cardboard cutout of her next to the dunk tank, holding a fake citation that read, "Excessive joy." Kids lined up to take their shots, and no one stopped them.